if you deny people, young people, the possibility of being themselves in terms of who they're attracted to, then you put society in danger, because those people go rotten, they go bad, and Edward does. He turned into a tyrant. That was the message that I felt we were giving, and I felt it was Marlowe's message. So there were a lot of people in this production, I think, who really cared about it, but we didn't write to the papers, and we didn't have banners, and perhaps we should have done.
Before we get down to this actual production, perhaps you could talk about the landscape within which this production actually happened.
Well, Richard will know more about it than I do, because he was running the company with Toby Robertson, who directed this production, and Ian McKellen, am I right? And he would be able to say why they decided to do Edward II. I suspect that not because it was a gay play, not because it was the first play to have a gay hero written in English, I think that's true, but because it just fitted in with the idea of Prospect Theatre, which was a touring company, arriving at the Edinburgh Festival and subsequently on tour with a production to go with an already existing production of Richard II, which Richard and I had done the previous year to some acclaim. So we revived that, and Toby wanted to put a play with it, and I was going to revive Richard II, and I was asked to, I think, play Gaveston, and I think Alan Bates, am I right, Richard, was going to play? Oh, really? Well, I wouldn't have minded kissing him. Yeah, well, he didn't do it, and suddenly, out of the blue, I was asked to play the leading part. Now, that wasn't Prospect's norm. I mean, normally the parts were shared about, but for me, it became the show in which I played with Timmy the two leading parts in both plays, and. But it was not, we weren't doing it, as far as I was concerned, because it was a gay play and we thought we could stir up trouble with it, and it would be part of some nascent gay rights movement or anything like that. And I think, had Toby not directed it at Cambridge? Yes, with Derek Jacobi. Now, Derek Jacobi, the year before I arrived at Cambridge to study English, Derek was reading history at St John's and played Edward II, and directed by Toby Robertson, who directed this. And they went on to do it. They went to Stratford, the Open Air Theatre at Stratford. I think they recorded it for BBC Radio, of an idea. And so when I arrived at Cambridge, I knew all about Derek Jacobi. He'd played Edward II, and then when subsequently I was playing Edward II, I thought, as often happened in my career, I was following in Derek's footsteps. But I should just tell a little bit about Cambridge when we were all there. There was the Marlo Society. Now, they didn't just do Marlo, they did plays written about the same time as Marlo and Shakespeare were alive. And these were big productions, and when I was there, directed by wonderful undergraduate production directors, but also people like John Barton, who went on to become the eminence degrees of the Royal Shakespeare Company when he followed his old mate Peter Hall, also an undergraduate at Cambridge. And the Marlo Society was overseen by a lovely gay don called George Rylands, Daddy Rylands. And he, as a young man, had been part of the Bloomsbury Group. And the Bloomsbury Group had sitting in London drinking their coffee and were complaining about the standard of verse speaking on the English professional stage. And they said to Daddy, it's all recorded now, I didn't know it at the time, Daddy, you've got to do something about it, and you must teach those little boys and girls, mainly boys, at Cambridge how to speak verse. And he did. And he taught John Barton, and he taught Peter Hall, and he taught Richard Eyre, he taught Trevor Nunn, and he taught Nicholas Heitner, the four directors of the National Theatre after Laurence Olivier. So there was, and we were part of this, and that's what you've seen here. Now, You could decide whether you think we were speaking the verse well or not. I haven't dared watch any of this. I just came in at the end, but Timmy, you were doing very well indeed, and you didn't go to Cambridge, so perhaps we didn't need the Marlo Society at all. But that's the context in which this play was done. Nothing to do with gay rights, I don't think.
But it is, it's interesting. You mentioned that Derek Jacobi played Edward II a number of years before, but it still wasn't a very popular play, and it wasn't a very frequently performed play.
Mm-mm. No. But that's a pity, because it's a very good play. Now, you were seeing a recording of a stage production, but can you imagine being in the Piccadilly Theatre with 1,200 people? And that's pretty riveting stuff. It's a very bold sort of storytelling. It's bright colours. People are very much what they are and say they are what they are, but they're dealing with very real human emotions. It's not a pantomime. It's not Shakespeare, but it doesn't pretend to be. It's Marlowe's mighty line, and it's people standing up for themselves, and very. I think people can, in the 20th century, relate it to their own lives. I've lost the point of your question.
No, it's just the fact that it hadn't been performed very often, and I guess as a result of that,
very often, I suppose, because I mean there was a poker up a bum at the end, and. And when the play was done for the first time in the 20th century, in 1903, Harley Granville Barker had played Edward II. Now, Harley Granville Barker is the greatest critic, I think, of Shakespeare. You read his prefaces to Shakespeare. They're still very relevant, but wonderful actor, apparently. They played the poker scene behind a screen. Couldn't be seen. And I don't think there have been many productions since that, until we did it half a century later. Sybil Thorndike, is that a name anybody knows? Sybil Thorndike, that was certainly worth a round of applause. I mean, she of her time was a mixture of Vanessa Redgrave and Judi Dench, I suppose. She was radical, she was on the march, she was on the right side, she was a socialist and beloved. And a mother figure in the profession. And she was doing something up at the Edinburgh Festival in '69 and came to see us because she knew Paul Hardwick, one of the gay members of the staff who played Lightbourne, the man who kills Lightbourne. And we all stood. Oh, can you imagine? It's like the Queen, really, arriving. And we were all lined up, and it remembered to me, and she came along, very good, very good, very good. And I plucked up courage and said, "Did you see Harley Granville Barker play Edward II?" No, I didn't. And of course, enthusiastic, and I'm sorry that she'd missed it, 1903. She said, "Oh, I know why I missed it." She said, "I was working with Ben Greet in the United States of America, and we were doing lots of Shakespeare there. Yes, and we toured. I remember we went to California, and we went to a little village called Hollywood." And there were so few people living in Hollywood in 1903 that we had to move on to another village in the evening to do a second performance. And that's what I remember about her coming. And her being totally unfazed as a woman of the world and a great actress with the fact she'd just seen a play about, which included a perversion of buggery and was about passionate love between men. John Kidd was another man. He was a local, and he objected to the fact that we were doing this play in the very heart of the Church of Scotland, in the wonderful space there that Tyrone Guthrie had discovered in 1951, that you could have an open stage and the audience could be close, but round the stage on three sides. It's the device he used in Stratford, Ontario, with the theatre design there, and then the Guthrie Theatre in Minneapolis, and finally the Crucible in Sheffield. It's all as a result of the Edinburgh Festival. John Kidd, member of the Church of Scotland, was furious that we were doing this play. He'd been to see it. And the local watch committee was sent along. Now, their representatives, I think, were the two policemen in uniform that were sitting on the front row. And I just remember when I was having the poker up, just glancing in that direction, seeing both of them go. I don't know if we had standing ovations in those days, but they led it, and we didn't hear any more of them. And John Kidd faded from history. And of course, as Tim pointed out when talking about this recently, we sold every ticket as a result, and then went through the country and came to the
Piccadilly.
well, before the Piccadilly, we for 3 weeks we were at the old Mermaid Theatre in the City of London, and then we went to the Piccadilly. Yeah, so John Kidd helped us on our way, I think.
So you have this famous kiss that we were all talking outside, saying if there's ever a place in the world where we're going to be corrected by someone standing up and saying, no, that was not the first screen kiss between two men, it will be this place. However, I hope we're not going to be corrected. This was the first screen kiss between two men. I'm just curious about the decision of the BBC to actually film this and air this, and if there was any discussion, and I don't know if you were involved in that, or perhaps Richard, you were aware of any worries about controversy.
It was a play by Christopher Marlowe, contemporary of Shakespeare. It was the Prospect Theatre Company, highly respectable. It might have been run by a gaggle of gays, but but that wasn't the point. We were not gay sweatshop. We were mainstream devotees of classical theatre, and that's how the play was received, I think, and why it was put on television. Now, I've met many Americans who say this production was crucial in their lives, because on PBS, in Masterpiece Theatre, where it was shown, they saw for the first time in their lives two men kissing and couldn't believe it and took comfort from it. But otherwise, of course, 1967, we are celebrating, aren't we, the 50th anniversary of the partial decriminalisation of homosexuality. But that did not apply in Scotland. Half the cast was breaking the law, weren't we? I had my boyfriend up there, we were breaking the law. It was obscene. And so it was with a special relish, I think, that I was involved in this, because I knew it was a sort of finger up at the establishment and the law that had prevailed and still did in Scotland. It was, but I was in the closet. It was 20 years before I came out. There were no gay rights movements, standing outside with banners. If there had been, I'm not sure that I would have joined in with them. It's a foreign land 50 years ago.
But it is that interesting thing, like you said about the way that people responded watching this film in America on PBS, that it's not just the grand statements that make an impact. It's the things that people sit down to and watch in their everyday lives. And it's just that little, almost like the small brick in the wall that's removed. And,
Marlo, he's a hero for me, Christopher Marlowe. He died young. He was probably murdered. He'd probably been a spy, but and one of his enemies said of him, but I hope it's true, that he said, "He that loves not tobacco and boys is a fool."
Sorry.
The relish with which Robert Edison, one of the great actors of his time, in my view, up there with John Gielgud, I think, in terms of verse speaking and stature, and in some senses, I think he was a better but different actor than John Gielgud. He was capable of characterization and the relish with which he used to kiss me. It was a bit of a French kiss. And it must have been a thrill to him to be doing this play and presenting his own passion. And that's what I was doing. I'm sure overacting like Billio, but I did really care about the story and understand the story. It seemed to be so simple to me that if you deny people young people the possibility of being themselves in terms of who they're attracted to, then you put society in danger, because those people go rotten, they go bad, and Edward does. He turned into a tyrant. That was the message that I felt we were giving, and I felt it was Marlowe's message. So there were a lot of people in this production, I think, who really cared about it, but we didn't write to the papers, and we didn't have banners, and perhaps we should have done.
You mentioned You're Being Kissed. I think we should talk a little bit about the audition process for Gaveston that you went through, because I think it's a little unfair to place on another member of the cast that accusation when you yourself...
Yes. Oh, yes. I didn't mind Robert kissing me. Well, it was my idea, I think, when we were at Richard Cotterell's old haunt, Hampstead Theatre, doing the auditions, and you know, we were just trying out how I and prospective Gavestons looked together, and I suggested that we should just boldly ask them, would they mind kissing me? Because if they did, there's hardly any point in them playing the part, you know. We weren't going to be coy. And I have to tell you, James Robertson's lips are... Oh, there's someone with a hand up there. But James Robertson's lips were embracing and friendly and warm and luscious, and so it was a joy for me every night, and he got the part. So. Well, I mean, look at him.